Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just 1 minute. Okay, we still have quite a few coming in, so we'll get started in just a couple seconds. All right, welcome everyone. My name is Katrina Davis, and I'm the Senior Manager for Programs and Events at Georgia Core. We are so very happy to have you in this space with us today as we focus on a very sensitive but important topic that we might be faced with at some point in life. Before we get started, let's do a little housekeeping. Feel free to ask questions at any time throughout the webinar using the chat box or the Q&A box, and you can access these at the bottom of your screen. All attendees will be muted for the duration of the presentation, but there will be an opportunity to unmute and ask questions at the end of the webinar. As a disclaimer, this webinar is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained from this webinar with other sources and review all information regarding any medical condition or treatment with your physician. For those of you that are new to hearing about Georgia Core, we are a statewide based nonprofit that is focused on advancing cancer care through partnerships and innovation. And we do this through research, education, and advocacy. This webinar falls under our education arm with a focus on survivorship, caregivers, and their family members. To learn more about Georgia Core, please visit georgiacancerinfo.org. And now I'm going to briefly introduce our speaker, Neiasha Russell. She is the amazing leader of Instructions for Tomorrow, as well as Harriett's daughter. And I met her a few months ago and so moved by her story and also her mother's story and journey through cancer. She will introduce herself now, so I'll pass it off to you, Neiasha.
Thank you. Thank you. I am so happy to be here this afternoon, and I'm delighted to facilitate this webinar. As Katrina mentioned, my name is Neiasha Russell, and I'm the founder and CEO of Harriet's Daughters here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I am also the founder of Instructions for Tomorrow. I am a trained ANELDA end-of-life doula, and I will be wearing that hat throughout this facilitation of this particular webinar. So typically, when I mention that I am an end-of-life doula or a death doula, people have questions. The first question typically is, what is it that you do? What does that mean? And the next question is usually, how did you find how did you find yourself in that space? So I'll start with the first question. An end-of-life doula or a death doula, essentially, I liken it to a person who is a doula, a midwife. And so typically a doula or a midwife will usher in life, and an end-of-life doula ushers out life. So I assist individuals at their end-of-life journey. I kind of journey with them through that process. So I help them with any end-of-life planning that they might want to participate in. And I also assist them with their vigil. And in the end-of-life doula and in the death doula space, a vigil typically is when someone is actively dying. And we provide spiritual, we can provide mental, emotional support through that journey. So if the person, has specific wishes and requests, then as a doula, we make sure that those are carried out to the best of our abilities. And we also serve as a presence to family and caregivers and loved ones. So if there's anything that's happening that's stressing the family out or causing those to feel uncomfortable or just apprehensive about a certain situation or something that might be transpiring, an end-of-life doula will help kind of help individuals process that and will be a sense of peace through that process. The other thing that end-of-life doulas do, especially myself, is after a person has transpired, part of what we do is help individuals reprocess what they've seen or what they've experienced. So they might want to talk about some of the conversations that they had with their loved one before they transpired, or they might want to discuss some of the breathing patterns that they heard and experienced. So we serve as a sounding board for that individual to kind of reprocess those things and kind of deal with some of those emotions and feelings around that matter. And then we do some light or early grief work with individuals. And if we find that the grief is complicated, then we'll refer out so they can get some additional assistance. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I do, and I can answer more questions about my work at the end of the webinar. And the next question typically is, how did I land here? So again, as Katrina mentioned, I lost my mother. She didn't mention how, but I lost my mother to pancreatic cancer, and I journeyed with my mom, and that experience really was the kind of the genesis of kind of where I am right now. And Harriett's Daughters was founded from that experience, and Instructions for Tomorrow was also birthed from that experience. And I just kind of felt this desire to want to journey with people in their end of lives. And I feel like people should not be alone in that particular chapter of their life. And once I started to realize that this was another passion coupled with what I was already doing, to be honest with you, and to be completely transparent, I was embarrassed. I was afraid. I was worried. I thought that something was wrong with me. I was convinced that I had not completed my grieving process and that I was having mental health issues. I literally was worried. And I began to do some research, and I found out that there are a lot of individuals who volunteer and they journey with individuals at the end of life. And so that gave me a lot of peace and comfort. And it also let me know that I wasn't the only person that had this desire, and I wasn't alone. So I kind of archived it and spent some time doing some of my other work, and I was diving into my other passions, and it was in my peripheral. And I'm the kind of person that, spirit knocks, hey, there's something that you need to be doing. Remember this thing. And I kind of circled back around to it, and I did some research, and that's when I learned of ANELDA, and that's where I received my training to be an end-of-life doula, and the rest is history. And so I really enjoy having conversations with people about end-of-life matters, and I also enjoy helping individuals process their thoughts and their feelings around end-of-life matters. So like I said, I'm very, very happy to be here today. I am delighted, and I'm looking forward to our conversations and discussions around end of life. So for the next 60 minutes, we'll be exploring the significance of having open conversations around end of life matters. These conversations can sometimes be challenging, but they are invaluable, and they oftentimes can bring solace and peace and clarity to survivors, caregivers, and families. Today, we'll uncover effective communication strategies. We'll delve into the art of initiating these conversations and discussions, and we'll learn how to address concerns that might come up with empathy and respect. By the end of our time together, my hope is that you feel more empowered than you did when you signed on to the webinar this afternoon, and that you'll have the confidence that you need to move forward with these conversations with sensitivity. So thank you for being here. So just to kind of give you an outline of what we'll be discussing this afternoon, we'll be having conversations around 6 major components. So the first module will be around end-of-life conversations. So we'll be discussing or discovering how end-of-life conversations empower survivors, caregivers, and families. We'll explore the benefits of compassionate discussions while addressing some common fears that might come up. In module 2, we'll be discussing end-of-life planning. So we'll uncover some of the essentials of end-of-life planning, including advanced care directives, wills, healthcare proxies, etc. And then we'll learn how proactive planning eases stress and ensures that your wishes are honored. In module 3, we'll explore some empathetic communication strategies, so active listening, reflecting, those type of things. And we'll learn how to navigate difficult end-of-life conversations with understanding while fostering genuine connections. In module 4, we'll be discussing initiating conversation. So you'll learn how to initiate an end of life conversation. You'll be able to identify ideal moments to have those conversations while overcoming some barriers that might present themselves. And you'll also learn some tools that are available for you to have those dialogues. In Module 5, we'll be kind of tiptoeing in a little bit into sensitive situations. So you'll discover how to navigate concerns and questions gracefully. And then you'll also learn how to approach conversations around extremely sensitive matters. And the last module, Module 6, we'll be discussing strength and unity and how there's actually strength in having and building a support and network system. You'll also learn how encouraging or how open communication and understanding and cooperation within families and support systems, how beneficial that is as well. So those will be our modules for this afternoon. And just to kind of recap what you'll be learning in regard to the 6 modules. So again, in this webinar, you'll learn the importance of having end-of-life conversations. And by the end, you'll hopefully be able to start having these discussions and conversations on your own. You'll be able to overcome some obstacles and some barriers that you might experience, and you'll be able to navigate sensitive situations mindfully. Some of the key takeaways, end-of-life conversations are important. End-of-life planning matters. It offers peace of mind. Compassionate communication is key. Some barriers are going to be inevitable. They're going to happen. They're going to be there. Your approach matters, and there is strength in unity. So before we get started, I want to make sure that we kind of ground ourselves. While we're not talking about anything that's too emotionally charging or that's too heavy, we're still having conversations about end-of-life matters. And I'll be transparent, sometimes those conversations can be a little triggering. So I wanted to make sure that we kind of grounded ourselves by doing a quick activity, just a breathing activity. And I'm sure you guys have done this before, but this will give us a sense of presence, and it'll give us a sense of community as we move forward. So I can't see you all I can see is myself to the right, and I just see the tree and the sun. So hi everyone, I hope that you're there. I hope you're enjoying yourself thus far. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with this grounding activity. What I want you to do is, at the sound of my voice, you're gonna take 3 deep breaths. And as you take these inhales and as you release and exhale, you are going to just kind of think about community, think about a safe space, think about releasing whatever concerns that you have before you started or before you entered into this webinar. And then we're going to get started with the actual webinar. So we're going to take our first deep breath. And we're going to exhale, knowing that we're in a safe space for the next 60 minutes together, that we're here to learn and that we're here to discover. We're going to take another deep inhale. And exhale. And then we're going to take one more big, deep inhale. And then we're going to exhale. All right. The importance of end-of-life conversations, why they matter. End-of-life conversations, they matter for survivors, caregivers, and families. And to be honest, they really matter for anyone who is interested in discovering or navigating through end-of-life issues and matters, or just anyone who is ready to start having conversations around those particular topics. So it's really for anyone, but this particular webinar is specific for survivors, caregivers, and families. So for survivors, these discussions provide opportunities to communicate your wishes, ensuring that your preferences are respected as you move forward. For caregivers, you benefit from understanding your patients and or loved ones' needs, ensuring dignified care. And I'll give an example of that. When my mother was at her end of life, she had some specific requests around bedside manner. She didn't mind receiving hugs, and she didn't mind anybody rubbing her feet or putting lotion on her legs, but she didn't want her back and her shoulders and her arms rubbed. And so having conversations around end of life matters or wishes as a caregiver is important, because again, you'll benefit from understanding your patients and or your loved ones' needs, ensuring dignified care. For families, you can experience unity and reduced uncertainty as open conversations build supportive networks, and facilitate emotionally grounded choices. And overall, these dialogues really honor individuals' wishes and values, and they foster emotional well-being. It gives a sense of peace and empowerment for those who are involved in this journey. As I mentioned earlier, oftentimes when you're trying to navigate end-of-life conversations, sometimes you might experience some barriers, or there might be some obstacles to having those conversations. This is a quote. I was having a conversation with someone about end-of-life planning and about discussing their end of life, and they kind of said, you know what, if I talk about end of life matters, I feel like I'm calling in death, and it's going to happen sooner than later. I'm going to ask you guys, have you all experienced at any point the fear of having end of life conversations or anything of that matter? If so, drop a yes or a no in the comment box. Does this resonate with you? Have you felt like, man, if I talk about end of life matters, or if I talk about end of life planning, I am absolutely calling in death and I just do not want to talk about it? Anybody? No? Yes? No? Okay. Okay. I see a few answers. I see a few. Heard of others? Yes. I see an explanation point. Yes. Okay. No. Okay. Okay. Well, this is a concern for some people. And so we're going to talk about some of the barriers, some of the obstacles that you might face as you're approaching end of life conversations. No for me, yes for others. Okay. So barriers to end of life conversations. For some, it could be superstitions, religious beliefs. So if I talk about end of life matters, or if I start planning for the end, or if I do anything that relates to anything related to end of life planning, I feel like I'm not operating in faith, and they don't want to have the conversation. So those are some barriers that you might come against as you are trying to converse with someone about these types of things. And typically in a situation like that, you really have to give individuals the room that they need to be able to process what you're talking about, because typically if someone has superstitions and or religious beliefs, they're rooted deeply in those types of thoughts and feelings. And so your goal is not to change what their thoughts and feelings are, but to really just to kind of listen and to get a sense for how they feel about things. And then maybe you can circle back around and have a conversation about some of the things that they may have shared, more of an exploratory conversation. But again, if you find that you're in a situation and the person's like, I don't want to talk about this because I feel like it's against my religious beliefs, or I feel superstitious about this, then pause and don't have the conversation. Or you can say, you know what, let's explore this a little bit more. But superstitions and religious beliefs can sometimes be a barrier. And I see some people in the chat, I have seen how powerful denial can be for folks, both to protect them and also to avoid important conversations. Absolutely. Number two, fear of death and dying. That might also be a barrier to having end-of-life conversations. And that's also another one where you have to kind of be careful, because that requires a little bit more sensitivity, because if a person is not comfortable with their own mortality, the conversation probably isn't going to go far. So what I would recommend in a situation like that, if someone has a fear of death and dying, is to maybe to explore those fears. And again, you're not a therapist, you're not operating in a role as a psychologist or anything like that, but it's just having a conversation with a friend or a loved one or a colleague. Just to kind of put yourself in that mindset or that frame of mind that you're really just dialoguing about their thoughts, their perceptions, and their feelings. And, once they start having conversations about those things, and once they start to really process and reflect on their own mortality and their own belief systems, the door to having that conversation might be cracked a little bit more. But it also depends on how fearful they are. Because if they're really fearful, you might not have a conversation, and then you'll have to maybe suggest that they, talk to someone they trust, or connect with a spiritual leader, or maybe a counselor, so that they can kind of unravel some of their fears around death and dying. The next barrier can be age. I know that a lot of times I'll hear individuals say, well, I'm too young to talk about this, or, I'm just 25, or I'm 30, or I'm 18. And so that might be something that you might hear, or you might feel that a person might be thinking. And typically around those situations, my suggestion would be, just to kind of talk to them about, if, end of life planning doesn't mean that you are planning for your death for tomorrow, or for the next day, or for the next week, but really it's about being prepared. And while your hope is that they'll be around for a while, and you're honoring the fact that they believe that they're going to be around for a while, really just trying to help them understand that it's just a planning tool and a method. And sometimes, even though we're young, things happen. Sometimes we get ill. Sometimes we have emergency situations. All kinds of things can happen throughout our life journey. So really getting the person to understand that while you are young, or consider yourself young, and mortality for you is way off in the future, we really don't know what's going to happen. And, we really, we're not quite sure what to expect, because life happens. The next barrier is lack of knowledge. I know I've had conversations with individuals, and they might say, you know what, I didn't even know that, I don't even know what end of life planning is. What's end of life planning? And so if you are well versed in the topic, or you have participated in end of life planning yourself, or you have had conversations about end of life matters, this is an opportunity for you to educate the individual that you might be speaking with about end of life planning and matters. You can educate them, and you can share what you know, what you may have experienced. You might know someone close to you that may have experienced, an end of life situation, or they may have navigated some matters or some conversations, and you might be able to share some information about that. But in that particular situation, I would say that lack of knowledge, the goal is to educate them. And then false perception. This was an interesting one. This one kind of surprised me. I was having a conversation with an individual, and they said, Neiasha, you know what? I thought that, end of life matters and end of life planning really just had to do with just having a will. I didn't really know that there was more to conversations or planning or I just didn't know. And so I think here is just really, again, this is an educational piece. If you're having a conversation with a person and they're like, well, I don't have anything to leave. I don't have assets. I don't have land, or I don't have a house, or whatever the case may be, whatever their assumption is to, again, just try to educate them around that. Because to be honest with you, end of life planning kind of expands outside of assets. End of life planning deals with your medical care. It could be small things like, who is going to take care of your pets if something happens to you? Where can we find your keys if you were to get ill? I mean, it really encompasses a lot of different things. So again, having conversations with the person and letting them know that, hey, you know what? I understand where you're coming from and I get it. And you might not have land, and you may not have assets, and you might have thought that it's just for rich people or whatever their assumption is. But again, educating them around that topic and letting them know, and identifying and pinpointing things in their lives that might be important in regards to having end-of-life conversations around. The next barrier, strong feelings and emotions. I mean, again, a lot of times conversations around the end of life can be very triggering for a lot of individuals, and you might start or initiate a conversation and it goes completely left. The person gets anxious, they get angry, they shut down. And, I think that we have to honor people when they're in those spaces. And my recommendation would be that if you find yourself in a situation where you're experiencing some strong emotions or some tough feelings, to just pause the conversation. Don't force it. Just pause it. You can always circle back around to it. The other thing that I would recommend as well is exploring, maybe sitting down and exploring those feelings with that person. Again, not in a therapeutic role, not like that, but just more like, hey, you know what, I'm here with you. I'm sitting here with you. I'm sharing this space with you. What can we do? Let's talk about what your feelings and emotions are around this particular topic of conversation. I know that someone had mentioned that they tried to have a conversation with the individual and they got extremely anxious. So breathing fast, they might start talking fast. They might start fidgeting, in those situations, just pause and just sit there with them and ask them, what's going on? What is causing you anxiety about this conversation? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? So while there are barriers and there are ways to navigate those barriers, there are also some benefits, a lot of benefits to having end of life conversations around all types of things when it comes to preparing for the end of life. So let's talk about the first one. The first benefit is reduced anxiety and fear. So having these conversations allows individuals to express their desires and clarify their wishes, which can alleviate anxiety and fear about the unknown. Open communication often will demystify the process of dying and can provide a sense of control over one's own end-of-life journey. So again, having these open conversations about whatever their fear or anxiety is will often alleviate some of that fear and anxiety, but oftentimes because people don't want to have these conversations, it sits there. It just sits. And it sits, and it sits. Another benefit is opportunity to legacy build. So end-of-life conversations can be a platform for individuals to share their life stories, values, and lessons learned. This contributes to the creation of a meaningful legacy for their loved ones to cherish. So, you might have a conversation with the individual and they're telling you about family history. Like, hey, this happened. This person was in charge of this when we were younger. Grandma shared this with us. And this is how your great grandparents operated. Or, even this is how I feel about things. These are, my thoughts and desires and wishes for our family unit. So again, it's an opportunity for legacy building, an opportunity to share stories, an opportunity to share values and lessons that you've learned over your lifetime. But again, if you don't start the conversations, there won't be an opportunity for that to happen. Increase peace of mind. Knowing that one's wishes are understood and will be honored can bring a sense of peace and reassurance. Family members and loved ones can also find comfort in knowing that they are carrying out their person's wishes accurately. Enhanced quality of life. By planning ahead, individuals can focus on making the most of their remaining time rather than being consumed by medical and logistical decisions. This can lead to an improved quality of life during their final days. Preservation of dignity. Discussing end-of-life wishes allows individuals to maintain their dignity and autonomy. They can make decisions about their medical care, pain management, and other aspects of their final days, ensuring that their values and beliefs are respected. Stronger relationships. Engaging in end-of-life discussions can foster deep connections between individuals and their loved ones. It encourages meaningful conversations that go beyond surface level interactions and provides an opportunity for individuals to express their love, gratitude, and any unresolved feelings. I will share, I was having a conversation with one of my family members a while back, and we were talking about end-of-life matters. And I learned some things about this particular family member that I did not know. And we had the opportunity to laugh and joke even around end-of-life matters. And I can tell you that by the end of our time together, I definitely felt more connected to that individual. And the person had shared that they felt like having the conversation was so helpful because it allowed them to think about things they wouldn't normally think about. And like I said, I definitely feel a stronger sense of connection between not only this person, but any individual really that I had these types of conversations with, because you're diving into a person's soul, into their heart, into their spirit when you're talking about these types of things. So I definitely will, stronger relationships is a huge benefit. A reduced regret. End-of-life planning can help individuals avoid regrets about not having discussed important matters while there was still time. This can prevent feelings of guilt and remorse among both individuals and their loved ones. Reduce burden on loved ones. When individuals communicate their preference in advance, it relieves their loved ones from the burden of making difficult decisions on their behalf without clear guidance. This can prevent potential conflicts and guilt among family members. And I'm sure we all have heard stories about families that have had some conflict around these types of things because they didn't know. There wasn't a conversation, or maybe one person knew one thing and the other person didn't know the other. And so just having a conversation as a unit can also be very, very, very beneficial, because again, it reduces the burden and people know exactly what it is that you want, not just one person, but the family unit. Emotional preparation. Engaging in these discussions can help both individuals and their loved ones emotionally prepare for the inevitable loss. While the conversations can be difficult, they allow everyone involved to gradually come to terms with the situation. And again, I've experienced that personally, and I found it very beneficial. It does emotionally prepare you for a lot. My mother was very detailed in what her end of life would look like. She was a nurse, so she was well-versed, and she was aware on what would happen. But having conversations with her about her end of life and her thoughts and her feelings and her fears, her faith, all of those things, it definitely prepared me. It was not easy. But it prepared me emotionally, and it gave me a sense of grounding. And we were able to talk about a lot. So I definitely believe that there are a lot of benefits, even outside of emotional, but I wanted to focus on those today. All right, so we're gonna kind of pivot a little bit into understanding end-of-life planning. Do a time check, 34. So what is end-of-life planning? End-of-life planning refers to the proactive process of making decisions and documenting preferences for medical care, financial matters, and personal wishes as an individual approaches the end of their life. And I also might add that this can be an individual who's not approaching the end of their life. I was having a conversation with someone who's 35 and they have a lot, they have assets, they have a family, they have a lot going on in their lives. And they're like, you know what, Neiasha, I don't want to wait until the last minute. I know I'm just 35, but I want to be proactive and I want to have this conversation now. So again, end of life planning can be for someone who is on that end of life journey and they're approaching the end of life. But a lot of times, especially as a death doula or end of life doula, we work with individuals who want to kind of be proactive in that matter and kind of move things along. So some considerations, and I couldn't list, there's a lot of considerations, but I think these are kind of the major ones. So advanced care planning. So when you're considering planning for your end of life or for a loved one's end of life or whatever situation you may find yourself in, advanced care planning deals with your healthcare agent. So who's going to make decisions for you if you're incapacitated or if you're unable to make them for yourself? What kind of medical treatment do you want? Do you want to be resuscitated? Do you want, to receive, whatever the case may be? This really kind of molds a plan in place for what happens as you move forward. I see Monica Dean just said these conversations are so important. As hard as they are, it gives a level of peace to the caregivers. Absolutely. Advanced care planning also, you can talk about how you want your body to be disposed of. I mean, again, and these can be a little bit triggering, but do you want to be cremated? Does your family know if you want to be buried? Do you want a green burial? Do you know what a green burial is? Do your family members know what a green burial is? I mean, those kind of things are discussions that you can have when you're talking about end of life planning, and just your general wishes. What are your general wishes? Just in general. Again, I talk about pets because I have pets, and what's going to happen to my pets if something were to happen to me? Where are they going to go? What's going to happen to them? Where do I want to be buried? I mean, I've had to have those tough conversations. Estate planning. So this is dealing in the realm of trusts and wills, assigning beneficiaries for your accounts, durable power of attorney. Legacy projects is also an end of life planning consideration, and again, this doesn't have to be because you are approaching the end of life. You might want to be proactive and start these things now. So letters, videos, photos, journals, and memory box. And so one of the things that my mother did, and I'm not sure how many of you all were attending the conference last weekend, but I was speaking there and I spoke a lot about the conference. I'm sorry, let me be more specific. The Cancer Institute conference that was last weekend before last, I'm sorry. But I was asked to talk about my journey with my mom and our journaling. And, when we were journeying together, we participated in counseling, and our counselor recommended that we journal to each other as another form of communication, because again, sometimes these conversations can be difficult. And my mother had the opportunity to share a lot of her thoughts and feelings and wishes in this journal. And, not only did the journal serve as a space for her to share those thoughts and feelings, but it also evolved into an opportunity for me to read my mother's wise words years after the fact. And so, I'm very appreciative of the journal because I still read it to this day. I probably read it 2 days ago, but those type of things are things that you should consider when you're thinking about end of life planning. It's just not, again, wills or healthcare agents. It could be things, again, like letters and videos and photos, journals, memory box, recipe books. If there's a recipe, a family recipe, you can pass that down, or there's all kind of things that you can do, or art and DIY creations. I know some people make quilts. They use their old shirts or old articles of clothing, and there are actually organizations here in Atlanta where you can, kind of design a quilt or a blanket around some of your favorite articles of clothing and give to a loved one. So again, end of life planning can also kind of be in the space of legacy projects. Other things to consider would be vigil planning, and I kind of talked about that earlier. If again, and I know that these conversations can sometimes be a little bit difficult, but the more that people know, the more prepared they are. Vigil planning. So do you want to transition at home? Or do you want to transition in a hospital? I mean, and sometimes we don't have the option, but if you do have the option, what would be your preference? And what would that look like for you? You know, what would it smell like? Who would be there? What would you want to look at every day? Would you want to have access to books? I mean, those kind of things. It's almost like planning a wedding or any other event, but you're planning your vigil. Specific instructions, and this is one of my favorite ones, because when you think about specific instructions, we're talking about, again, where do I find your house keys? What bills do I need to pay? Do I have access to your passwords and your passcodes? Those kind of things. End of life celebrations, and again, counseling. So those are all the things that you can consider as you are navigating these conversations. Excuse me. When I see somebody pop something in the chart, I heard of a woman who had her father sign a birthday card for each of her son's birthday. So he would have a card from Pops since he wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet him. I thought this was beautiful. Absolutely. Absolutely. End of life conversations reduces stress. I mean, just to be kind of honest with you, it really reduces stress. And I had one person tell me, Neiasha, once I got done, I felt empowered. And you do feel a sense of empowerment, the worry, the concern, and not for everybody, but there are a lot of people that do feel empowered. I had another person share with me from a different perspective that, hey, you know what? I'm so glad that my mom took the time to participate in the activities that she needed to prepare herself and us for her end of life, because now I can grieve in peace. I'm not worrying about trying to figure out where her bills are. I'm not worrying about trying to pay things. I'm not trying to find things, because all of those things were organized and put in order before any of this happened. So I have definitely myself felt, and I have heard of a lot of people feeling just the reduction of stress after having these conversations and participating in end of life planning activities. All right, time check. Communication strategies. I'm not going to go fast, but I'm going to kind of breeze through this a little bit because we're coming up on 1:42, and I want to make sure that I leave time for question and answer. So, when you're having these conversations, how do you do it? What do I do, Neiasha? So the first thing, the primary thing, is that you participate in active listening. So active listening during end-of-life conversation really entails providing undivided attention, using verbal and nonverbal cues to show empathy and respond thoughtfully. So when you're having conversations with a person about end-of-life matters, you want to make sure that your focus and your attention is there. You're not watching television, you're not on your phone texting or on TikTok or whatever it is that you do, but you're actually there 100%. And you also want to make sure that your responses are reflective. So if somebody says, hey, you know what, Neiasha, I am scared. I don't want to talk about this because I'm afraid to die. So a reflective response would be, you know what, I hear you. What I hear you saying is that you're afraid to die. And I understand, because I once had that fear as well. Instead of saying something like, oh, you'll be okay. Not that anybody would say that, but you'll be surprised. Some people really just don't know how to navigate these types of conversations in a sensitive way. So you want to make sure that your attention is focused, that you're there, that you're not doing anything else. You want to make sure that you're reflecting what they're feeling. You want to ask open-ended questions. So how do you feel about this? What thoughts do you have around this? What worries you the most? What things do you want to talk about? So again, open-ended questions. And then, nonverbal cues. So when a person is talking to you and you're focused and you're reflecting their responses and you're asking open-ended questions, you want to make sure that you're offering nonverbal affirmations. Okay, I hear you, you're providing eye contact, you're responding. All of those things matter. So again, you want to be an active listener. So focused attention, reflective responses, open-ended questions, and nonverbal affirmations. Just a quote to share, just something for you to think about. Empathy is seeing with the eyes of another, listening with the ears of another, and feeling with the heart of another. So really just being present with a person. All right, handling difficult emotions and reactions. So as you're having these conversations, and we kind of talked about this earlier in the webinar, you might experience someone who's feeling angry. You know, they don't want to talk about it. They're disinterested. They might feel annoyed. You know, they might get a little depressed or sad, anxiety. They might experience a little bit of frustration. So as I mentioned, in these particular types of conversations, I think that it's best to pause. Don't force the conversation, but just kind of pause. Just pause and kind of meet them where they are. Again, ask open-ended questions, reflect what they're saying, ask open-ended questions. I think I might have just said that. But again, just sitting with them and making sure you're focused. And if you feel like it's a little too heavy, or that their response is a little bit more than you might be able to handle, you can always suggest, you know what, so and so and so and so, I understand, or I may not understand, you know, what you might be feeling or what you might be thinking. May I suggest that you talk to, you know, you might suggest a counselor, or if they are part of a faith-based community, offering some assistance there, or another trusted loved one that might be able to handle the conversation. But those are some emotions and reactions that you might experience. And there might be some other ones. All right, initiating end-of-life conversations. So you have to identify the right time. Your approach will make or break the conversation. So you're not trying to catch somebody while they're in the middle of cooking dinner and they had a bad day at work, or you're not trying to catch someone when they're, you know, they're planning, they're working on a work project, or, I mean, you kind of get the gist of what I'm saying, is that you want to catch someone when they're prepared, when they might be in a space to be able to have a conversation like this. And oftentimes that might mean that you might have to plan it. Hey, I want to talk about this, or I'm interested in talking about this. You know, will you be available on this particular day and time to be able to have this kind of conversation? But identifying the right time will make or break your approach. So I'm going to go through these kind of quickly, but here are some conversation starters. Again, you can tweak these. These are just examples. They're not specific to any particular type of situation, but they might be helpful. So the first one, I've been reading about the end-of-life planning, and it made me think about us. I care deeply about your feelings and concerns. Can we make some time to share our thoughts and wishes with each other? That's an example. Another one might be, you know, considering recent events. I've been thinking a lot about the future and how unpredictable life can be. It might not be the easiest topic, but can we discuss our thoughts on death and dying? I've been thinking about my end-of-life preferences, and I'm hoping we can have an open conversation about this. I'd also love to hear about your feelings on the matter, and if you're comfortable. I just saw a tip from Katrina. She said, take a screenshot. And then number 4, I know we're young, you know, but life can be kind of crazy. You know, would you like to chat about our plans for unexpected emergency? It could help us be more prepared. And again, these are just, you can tweak these conversations or these conversation starters how you like. These are just something that would help. I've been thinking about what would happen if either of us were to get sick. It's a tough topic, but could we talk about how we'd like to handle things if that ever happens? And then the other one was, I know this diagnosis is a lot to process, and I'm here to support you. When you're ready, could we talk about your hopes, concerns, and how you'd like to move forward? You'll notice that I put a star by number 5. And the reason I did that is because I feel like when you approach end-of-life conversations from a health perspective, I think that might make the conversation more easy for everyone. Hey, you know what? We're humans. Things happen. Sometimes we get ill. What are your plans? How can I support you if something were to happen to you? And then kind of take the conversation from there. And again, you don't have to say it like that, and you don't have to use any of these starters, but these can kind of jumpstart some ideas for you. I mean, it can be as simple as, I was watching the news last night and I saw what happened in downtown Atlanta. Can we talk about this? What are your thoughts? And then kind of the conversation can kind of evolve from there. But those are just some conversation starters that might be helpful for you. 5 wishes. 5 wishes is a great tool for individuals if you're wanting to have conversations about end of life matters, but you just kind of don't know how. So this tool will help you communicate your desires in a clear and compassionate manner. It helps promote open conversations with your family, caregivers, and healthcare providers. And it just kind of helps you kind of think and process through some things. And so I'll just kind of name briefly what the 5 wishes are. So you'll be able to identify the person I want to make, or to make your healthcare decisions for when you can't make them for yourself. Your second wish is, hey, what's my wish for the kind of medical treatment I want or don't want? The third wish is my wish for how comfortable I want to be. The fourth wish in this tool is my wish for how I want people to treat me. And again, this is in the event that you're incapacitated and you're not able to make decisions on your own. My wish for what I want my loved ones and healthcare team to know. So 5 wishes, I have an example. This is what the document looks like. So I have a resource page and you can click on that, but it'll take you here. I've used this before and it worked beautifully. It's a great resource. It really helps you kind of dive into these types of conversations. All right, navigating sensitive situations. We're not going to have time to really do a deep dive into this, but hopefully we'll have another webinar and we can do some deep diving. But just some things to be mindful of, that when you're having conversations with individuals around end of life matters, with a few things that you want to kind of keep in mind. Religious beliefs, children, people's or individuals' perspectives and personal perspectives on life and their belief systems, their insights on life. All of those things they influence the conversation. So you want to make sure that you're mindful and that you're sensitive to those things, and really stepping back from your own beliefs and your own desires and your own wishes, and really listening, active listening, and learning what it is that the person is trying to communicate to you in regards to these specific things. The other thing to really keep in mind too is for individuals who may have received a recent diagnosis that may be really fresh. You just want to make sure you're sensitive to that as well. My biggest recommendation would be to make sure that you give the person the opportunity to sit with that. So they don't have to rush and do things unless things are imminent and things have to happen in a super timely manner. My recommendation would be, as a caregiver, as a family member, to just sit. Allow them time to process what they've just learned about their new life, and then maybe circle back around to it later and ask them how they're feeling. But there's no need to try to tackle all of these end of life matter conversations immediately. I would steer clear of that. All right. So finding strength and unity, having a circle of supportive friends, family, and professionals can provide emotional grounding. It definitely can help individuals and families navigate end of life matters with strength and ease. Communication is always key. It fosters open communication within families and support system, and it really reduces misunderstandings and eases decision-making. And cooperation, when you have a supportive network of family and friends, that's supporting you, you're communicating with them, it hopefully will evolve into cooperation, because what you want to happen is that if anything were to happen, that everyone is on the same page, and that it's a collaborative decision-making process where everyone's perspective is valued, and it avoids conflicts and allows for decisions to be aligned with the person who is actually, walking through their own personal journey with end of life. So again, there's definitely strength and unity. So involving friends and family, again, at your comfort level, or at the person's comfort level, or at your patient's comfort level, or what have you, but making sure that you have a tribe of individuals. All right, woo! We are at the question and answer portion. Katrina, do we still have enough time? How many minutes do we have for Q&A? Or do we have any questions or anything?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so we do have a question. Give me one moment to get her information up. And Melissa Days, if you're still here, I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask your question.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. Okay, Melissa, I have given you the option to speak, so you can ask your question.
I'm sorry, I must have hit the or raised my hand by mistake, so I
Okay.
apologize.
No problem at all.
No worries.
All right. Does anyone else have a question that they would like to ask live? If not, we do have one in the chat. It says, what certification program would you recommend to someone interested in training as a deaf doula?
Absolutely. So I trained through ANELDA, which is the International End of Life Doula Association. They are an internationally recognized organization, and they did a phenomenal job. They're very thorough. You can you can Google ANELDA. It's INELDA, ANELDA.
All right. Kimberly asks, will the slides be available after the presentation? I know we'll have the recording. Are you going to make your slides available?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I've
Awesome.
access to the slides. Absolutely.
Okay, so we can get those sent out. Resource page, that'll be coming up after this Q&A section, and then I'll also email out the resources when I send the follow-up email. Teresa Williams says, powerful presentation. All right, and we do have a question here. Someone asks, how do you approach the conversation with a teenager, the end of life conversation?
It depends on what I probably need a little bit more information about what you're asking. So is the parent, are they dealing with the end of life diagnosis, or is this general planning? I need a little bit more information.
Adults is dealing with an end of life diagnosis and wants to start this conversation with a teenager.
Okay, so I would have some questions for the individual, but the first thing that I would say is to be as open and honest as you can be. You know, and that would be my start, is to be open and honest about your diagnosis. And you know your child better than anyone. So holding that in the palm of your hand while being open and honest. I have found, and I know we have about a couple minutes left, that when I've worked with families, they all have said that, you know what, Neiasha, especially those families that waited until the last minute to share, they regretted that decision. They wish they would have had conversations with their children earlier in their process. Now, I know everyone is different and you have to make a decision based on your own heart and spirit and where you are. But I will just say, for the most part, the individuals and the families that I have worked with, they have kind of in unison just kind of shared that, hey, you know what, I wish I would have had this conversation earlier. So the first thing I would say to the individual is just make sure you're open and honest with your teenager. And again, it depends on what age they're at, but there's some resources too. So reach out to me individually and I can share some specific resources for you regarding how to have end of life conversations after a diagnosis, and it'll break it down by age. I have information like that.
Okay, and can you share your email address with the audience?
Yes, let me get to the next. We'll skip through that. Let me get through. So this is my resources page. So if you scan the QR code with your phone, you'll be able to grab resources. So books and reading recommendations, website recommendations, advanced care planning tools, end of life education. I think there might be a couple of webinars, not webinars, but podcasts that might be available to you, and then financial and legal resources as well. And then you can also reach out to me individually for more specific needs. But I was trying to make it as general as possible. And then I have a little bit of homework, and this is my last question to you all. So whether you're a survivor, whether you're currently a caregiver, or whether you are a family member, or maybe you're just here because you want to learn about end of life matters, this is what I want you to think about over the next day, week, month, year. Consider the concept of a living legacy, the positive impact you can make on others' lives while you're still alive. What steps can you take to start cultivating a meaningful living legacy? And that will kind of get you started on having conversations and thinking deeply about end of life planning. or end of life matters. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can also scan this QR code, and this will get you to, if you have questions specifically about Harriet's daughters, which is my other hat, I can answer questions regarding that. The information is there. And if you have questions about end of life conversations and matters, then contact me through instructions for tomorrow. But all of my contact information is there. And thank you so much. I'm sorry if I got tongue-tied. I was a bit nervous. I'll just be transparent. I was. And but I am extremely happy to share this information with you. I hope that we can have some more. And I hope that you learned something from this information, and that you found it valuable, and that it gave you something to think about, and that you'll consider some things, and that you won't wait till the last minute. Please don't wait till the last minute. And if anybody wants to have individual conversations with me about my journey or about any other recommendations I have, I'm more than happy to do so. I'm in the process of publishing a guided journal on having conversations around death and dying, and exploring those things and those perspectives and your feelings and your thoughts. So there's a lot happening in this space. And so if you want to connect with me, feel free to. I want to help. I want to help people, and I want to help make sure that individuals can really feel comfortable having these conversations, and again, alleviate any fear. So thank you again. And so
and thank you. That it was wonderful. It was a wonderful presentation. I have one other question here that came in.
sure.
You have a minute. Someone says, do you provide services to those who are residents of Georgia or outside of the state?
Both. Are you asking specifically for instructions or for end of life doula? If you're asking for end of life doula, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So out of the state also.
Yes. And again,
Okay.
that it just depends on the situation. So if you're interested or you have questions about that, just contact me individually, and I'll be more than happy to share information with you regarding that. But yes.
Awesome. Okay. Yes, lots of wonderful comments here complimenting your presentation. And thank you from me as well. I really loved how you and your mother were able to journal back and forth to each other. I thought that was very, very powerful, and something that a lot of people won't have the opportunity to do if they don't take the time to have conversations like this and establish what this might look like for them. So thank you for sharing your personal story, and having this wonderful webinar for us, so that we can open up the door to these very important conversations. Just to wrap up, I will be sending a follow-up email with a survey about today's presentation. I'll also send the resources that Neiasha shared here and her contact information in case you want to get in touch with her. And then if this has prompted maybe some follow-up learning that you would like to be a part of, let us know, and we can put something together for you. But I thought this was a step in a really powerful direction for having this type of conversation. So thank you all for attending today, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.